What's the best way to train our quads according to the science? Well, to start, we should understand basic quad anatomy and muscle actions. The quads are made up of four heads which all serve to extend the knee, but the biarticular rectus femoris also acts as a hip flexor. So knowing this, a squat will not grow our rectus femoris because of the hip extension component in a squat, which we can also see in every single piece of outcome data on this subject. So a movement to challenge hip flexion or pure knee extension will be necessary, but this doesn't mean that we should restrict ourselves only to knee extension movements. While the data comparing squats and leg extensions is limited, what we can see is that there seems to be slightly higher growth in the proximal sites of the vastus muscles, and the EMG data is also slightly higher in squats than it is in leg extensions. One thing we can do to make our squats a little bit more quad dominant is by manipulating the external moment arm with a sissy stance. EMG data on the quads also seems to show that any squat like a pendulum with a mid-position resistance profile will be best for training the vastus muscles. But leg extensions will always be the best exercise for growing your quads due to the fact that all four heads of the quadriceps will be trained at the same time. But not all leg extensions are made equal. Leg extensions like this one that I'm using in this video, where I'm doing 410 pounds, are quite length and biased to the cam, but at the same time don't allow for great range of motion where the movement is the hardest. This is unfortunately how most leg extensions are, and why you probably see more growth with length and partials for leg extensions, not because of the stretch, but because of joint torque. This shouldn't be so controversial, but the stretch has become so overblown in importance. I think that it's important to mention that the quads don't grow better from stretch position work in squats, and if the stretch was that important, they would grow better, which just confirms that it's not the stretch that causes more growth with length and biased knee extensions. While a sissy squat or reverse Nordic curl may allow for a greater range of knee flexion, the quads seem to work best with about 45 to 100 degrees of knee flexion based off their length tension relationship, and greater ranges of knee flexion aren't necessary because of this. While sissy squats and reverse Nordics are fine alternatives, they both aren't as easy to perform in overload, and you may experience passive insufficiency depending on how you perform them, which is why I would recommend doing a leg extension instead. So with your leg extensions, you can actually band them to place the challenge closer to lockout so that you don't have to use as much weight, and seeming that the quads are the only thing that's extending the knee here, their leverages don't really matter too much, and just training them where they get challenged the most does. You could also put the seat back a little bit, increasing the hip extension angle, helping grow the rectus femoris a little bit more by decreasing active insufficiency. But it's not the game-changing tip that most people are making it out to be. It's at most 1 millimeter extra in the proximal and distal regions from reducing active insufficiency within the rectus femoris. Still a useful tip nonetheless. The quads also seem to have a very high recovery time, partially due to their voluntary activation and fiber types. So most people can probably handle more volume for their quad movements if managed properly, but diminishing returns on volume still apply. So to put this all together, the best way to grow your quads is with a combination of knee extension movements and squat patterns with the external moment arm length maximized, with possibly slightly higher volumes than most other muscles if applicable.